Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm be grading all of the big major trades that have happened over the course of the NHL offseason. It's taken me quite a minute to get this video out. I originally planned on getting it out pretty quickly after the free agency grades, but ended up waiting for, I was hoping more big trades would drop, as there was heavy rumors regarding teams like the Penguins and other teams around the league that were rumored to make big moves that never really materialized, and then, it kind of just got put on the back burner and kept putting it off and off. So I'm finally getting it out now as real life stuff took over. So we'll get out this video, and then after I'm done with this video here, I'm going to be getting right on to my prospect rankings. Hopefully we'll have those videos up and out in the next few weeks. As those get started, those will take a little minute to edit and get together, but once they're up, I'll start firing those off. We can get into some prospect ranking stuff over the summer. But let's jump into today's video, which is the trade grades. We'll get right into it with the first big trade of the offseason. This is actually the first trade of the offseason. It was the Rangers and Ducks in the Chris Kreider deal. The Rangers sending Chris Kreider and a 2025 fourth for Carey Terrence and a 2025 third. Overall, I think this is a really good trade for the Rangers. I give them a B+, while I give a C- to the Anaheim Ducks. For the Rangers, you were looking to dump that Kreider contract to spend that money elsewhere. They ended up spending it in a few different places, like the Vladislav Gavrikov contract and other things. But overall, dumping a contract like that and getting a decent prospect in Carey Terrence, along with upgrading a fourth to a third round pick, is pretty solid value. Both the picks didn't end up resulting in any major prospects for as far as what I'm considering major prospects. They weren't guys that slipped very far that they stole. Just solid. And for the Ducks, C-. I really just don't see what the Ducks are building with this roster in general. It's just they're so young, and they keep taking on these guys, especially for the Rangers, with Trouba and Kreider, and then guys like Gudis and Killorn and Strome, and they just don't really fit what I think the Ducks should be trying to build with their young team. And I really just don't know what they're doing. They're buying on these expensive aging veterans whose best years are behind them, who have term, and they're not getting assets back to take on these contracts. If they were getting picks or prospects to take on these contracts, different story, but they are paying to take on these players. For some reason, they want these players, and I don't think that should be the type of players they're pursuing. You want to pursue these kinds of guys, do it in free agency. You don't spend assets to do it, and even then, I still don't think it's the right choice. Moving along, we'll get to the next trade of the offseason. That was the Devils dumping Eric Hollow's contract over to the Predators for Jeremy Hansel, a 2025 fourth-round pick. I give the Devils a B on this deal. You create some cap space on a player that just wasn't fitting for you, and you get a fourth-round pick back. And for the Preds, a C. I think with taking on a contract like that, you'd hope you'd actually get an asset back, similar to with the Ducks. And the Preds are in a weird position. I'm really not sure what to make of that roster. If they plan on being good next year, Holla could be a decent middle six, bottom six piece. But overall, it's kind of mediocre. Like a C is just a meh. Nothing. There's no real upside to this move for the Preds. And for the Devils, you free up the cap space and get a pick back. It's a solid piece of business there for the Devils. Now to the Dallas Stars and Seattle Kraken, the Mason Marchment trade. I give Dallas an A for this deal, getting back a 2026 third and a 2025 fourth for Mason Marchment's $4.5 million contract. I give it an A. You had no leverage in the situation at Dallas. Every team in the league knew Dallas was the most cap-strapped team in the league. They needed to move out contracts, they needed to create cap space to re-sign guys and to upgrade their roster in any sense. And Mason Marchment was the guy that was rumored to go around. And yes, he can be a valuable piece. But knowing that Stars had no leverage, and that if they just kept the contract, that they would be just stuck with it, and there was nothing they could do about it. They should have been able to, I don't know. This Kraken should have gotten assets to get it, if you know what I'm saying. Dallas shouldn't have actually received much in return for a player that they should have been forced to give up, and that they had no leverage in the situation, and yet Dallas still managed to get a third and a fourth round pick. So overall, really good value for Dallas. For Seattle, I give it a C because, again, like I said, you should be getting a third round pick on top of Marchment because of the fact that Dallas has no leverage. Dallas needs to move out this player, or they cannot re-sign their key guys. They cannot make big upgrades. And then straight up for Seattle, I don't know what you're building there. Again, they're in the similar boat to Anaheim. Mason Marchment, you're not a playoff team. Mason Marchment's a great piece for a playoff team, a gritty bottom six, or he can be a good piece for a playoff team. for Seattle. He's not like this elite point scorer who's going to really help you make the push to the playoffs in a loaded Western Conference. This is a move that doesn't move the needle for me, and it's just kind of a waste of cap space for Seattle. If you're gonna take on this player, take a pick back with it. That's how you should be doing that. When you're picking up those veterans that have bad contracts that don't really help you or are a big boost, take a pick back. Don't give 2 picks. So really not sure on that move for Seattle. So yeah, I give it a C for them. Now another move Seattle made shortly thereafter was the Andre Burakovsky deal with Chicago. Seattle got Joseph Veleno, who they then quickly bought out. So I give it a C or a C for that. I thought Veleno could have been a decent piece for Seattle. That's the kind of player that you can try and like revitalize, similar to what they did with Capo Caco, who just had an extension today. But they just bought him out for some reason. It's really not the contract. I feel like didn't need to be bought out. It was very, very cheap. Regardless, they just wanted to dump Burakovsky, I suppose. And for Chicago, I'll give it a B-. I think you need more offensive powered wingers to put in that top 6 to play with the likes of like Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar and all these other guys. So it's decent for them, but I don't know if Burakovsky's really that guy. He's had struggles staying healthy recently and has just not been that good in general. But there's some potential he could be a decent offensive boost for that unit in the middle 6. Moving along to the Trevor Zegras deal. Trevor Zegras headed to Philly, Anaheim getting back Ryan Poehling, a 2025 second and a 2026 fourth. Given an A- for Philly. They got a really good value on this deal, I think. There's still a ton of potential in a guy like Trevor Zegras. He's got some upside. He still is a high potential player who's got a lot of skill. He just needs to tap into it. Maybe Philly could be that spot where he does. For Philly, it's another guy who I don't think can play center, and their wings are really loaded. So we'll see how he fits. But in terms of pure value, I think Philly got a really good deal, and Zegras fits their timeline well, so it makes sense for them. For Anaheim, I really didn't understand the need to trade Zegras. I give him a C+. To me, there was no force. I don't know why they were so eager to trade a guy like Trevor Zegras. I get he had been on a decline. He hadn't really lived up to the hype he had his rookie year, but why trade him at his all-time low to me? Like you could hold on to him for a little longer. So this is a guy you spent a high draft capital in, and all you get back is a 2nd round pick, a 4th round pick, and Ryan Poehling. Poehling's a decent bottom 6 4th liner. I like Eric Nielsen, who they drafted with the 2nd round pick. And then you get a 4th. So it's just like, it's kind of just like another meh deal for Anaheim. I give it a C+ for them. The other thing to consider for Philly is this was made before the 2025 draft, and Philly had like 6 or 7 2nd round picks. So this 2nd round pick is almost nothing to them. They had no need for this pick. So that makes it even better for Philly, and that's part of the reason why they got the A- as well. Next up, you have the Evander Kane trade with Edmonton and Vancouver. I give Edmonton an A- for getting back a 2025 4th round pick for Evander Kane, and Vancouver gets a D. This is very similar to the Seattle, the Mason Marchment deal with Seattle and Dallas I mentioned earlier. The difference is Kane has been even less healthy, is even older than Marchment, and has not been as good as Marchment. So, and the Canucks are a more cap-strapped team, not a young team like Seattle who can afford to take on the cap space. The Canucks aren't cap-strapped, but they're not exactly loaded with cap space. So, to me, this deal makes no sense for Vancouver. And again, Edmonton, they have no leverage. They needed to move out cap space desperately to make additions to retool their team. Evander Kane had to be on the way out. They had no leverage. Why are you giving them a 4th round pick? They should have to give you a 4th round pick. And I also like the pick that Edmonton made. David Lewandowski's a solid piece in that 4th round as well. But yeah, an A- for Edmonton, a D for Vancouver. Really don't understand the need to pick up an Evander Kane type if you're the Canucks, especially when you had to pay an ass to do it. You shouldn't have had to do that. Next, a big trade here, the JJ Peterka deal. This one kind of shocked me for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, Peterka to Utah for Josh Doan and Michael Kesselring. I give this an A for the Utah Mammoth. They sent him to a very reasonable contract after the fact, in my opinion. And overall, this is just a really solid pickup, a perfect piece to add to your lineup. He fits your age group. He can fit right into your top 6 immediately, be a great scoring threat. And he didn't want to stay in Buffalo. So a really, really good deal for Utah. And you didn't give up any key pieces to your roster. No guy who's going to be a real difference maker. I expected to see a 1st round pick in here or a top tier prospect, something like that back for Peterka. But Josh Doan, who had really fallen out in Utah ever since his rookie year, where he was really solid, but he'd kind of fallen out of favor and just couldn't really carve out a true spot in the lineup permanently, so no real role for him there. And Michael Kesselring was the big piece. He's a really solid, big right shot defenseman, which I think is what Buffalo was looking for here. They wanted a right shot guy back, and they got that, and Kesselring is solid, but it's a little underwhelming. I think Kesselring's a solid second pair guy, but he's not like an elite second pair guy, and you traded a guy who can be a top end first line top six winger for that. And Josh Jones is a solid piece too. So yeah, C for Buffalo and A for Utah, because yeah, Michael Kesselring, he's a great piece, but Utah has so many defensemen in their system. They signed Simashev, they got Maverick Lamoureux who needs to play, and they have tons of other pieces, John Reno, Sean Dursey, Mikhail Sergachev, all these other guys in their lineup that need the ice time. So you can afford to part ways with one defenseman if it's going to get you a player like JJ Peterka. So a really good piece of business done here by the Mammoth. Another deal for Seattle that is just kind of meh as we get the Frederick Gaudreau trade. Minnesota trades Gaudreau to Seattle for a 2025 fourth. I give it a C to Seattle, a B for Minnesota. For the difference with Gaudreau is he's not a super expensive player for Seattle, and he can play that bottom six role, so it's a decent guy, but again, not really sure what they're building there. It's a weird pickup in my eyes. For Minnesota, free up some cap space, 4th round pick. They took Adam Banak here, another case of I think they used this pick really well. Minnesota has no fear of drafting the undersized guys that slip to them. Adam Banak is exactly that. To grab him there, really good value. So yeah, I give it a B for them because getting the pick back and then what they use the pick for also helps boost their grade up a little bit there to a B. Now we get to a weird trade. This was Capitals and Panthers just before the draft. Justin Sourdif to the Capitals for a 2026 second and a 2027 sixth. This deal made no sense to me. Sourdif is he's 23 years old now, and he really hadn't done much of anything at the NHL level. He has been an okay AHLer. He was a former second or third round pick 5 years ago at this point. And was just kind of a failed prospect at this point. Just hadn't really been able to find his game or get to the next level. And the Panthers get a second round pick. If I'm not mistaken, he was a 3rd round draft pick. So they got back a better pick than they spent on him. He was the 87th overall pick in 2020, 3rd round draft pick. And he didn't reach his potential. He didn't pan out. He was not a success story. And yet they still got a better asset back than what they spent on him. That is some absurd asset management by Bill Zito. He is, in my opinion, the best GM in hockey, and this is why. I don't know, the Capitals are making great moves. This move to me makes no sense. You have a ton of forwards, a great young prospect pool too. Justin Sourdif does nothing for you. He'll be buried in your AHL lineup, and that's that. Like there's never going to be anything here to me. And a 2026 second round pick, that'll be flipped for a good piece of the deadline next year, I'd bet. So really good work by Florida. I give them an A. I give it a D- to the Capitals, just not understanding what they saw in Sourdif. Next up, we go to the Noah Dobson deal, the big deal that broke right before the draft, and this really started the rumor mill to swirl around the draft that we didn't end up seeing none of the trades we were hoping for, but regardless, the rumor mill was swirling. So Noah Dobson to Montreal in exchange for Emil Heineman and their 2 first-round picks in this draft, 16th and 17th overall. This trade was the value of this trade was very dependent, or for the Islanders at least, it was very dependent on what the Islanders did with those picks. For the Habs, I like this trade regardless of what the Islanders got. I give it an A to them. This is just a win-win deal in general, but for the Habs, you have a great prospect pool, a great young core. The 16th and 17th overall picks aren't going to be major factors for you, like a Noah Dobson will for the next 8 to 10 years. So I love this deal for the Habs for that reason. So yeah, I give them an A. For the Islanders, this A grade rests solely on what they did with those picks. The rumors were they wanted to package those picks and try and trade up back into the top of the first round to scoop up James Haggins on top of Matthew Schaefer. And that was what the rumors were. And they tried to do that, but they didn't succeed. But they ended up with a great haul regardless. Grabbing Victor Eklund and Keyshawn Aitchison at 16th and 17th overall is unreal value. They had by far the best first round of the NHL draft. I had Victor Eklund ranked 6th. I had Keyshawn Aitchison at a 12 or 13 overall in this class, and they got them at 16th and 17th. These are 2 guys I was hoping the Penguins would draft at 11 and 12, and they got them 5 picks later. So overall, the value was, depending on what the picks were, and the picks were done really well. Great piece of business by Matthew Darsh. I love this trade for both sides. This is a true win-win deal, an A for both sides in this trade. Now a trade that was not a win-win deal, the Gavin Brindley, Charlie Coyle, Miles Wood deal with Colorado and Columbus. This deal made no sense to me. For Colorado, I give it an A. I mean, Charlie Coyle, I think, would have been a fine centerman for them to have in their middle six this year. There was no real problems with it. Miles Wood was kind of a dead contract you didn't want to have on your roster anymore. And you ended up getting Gavin Brindley, a really solid prospect who's got some decent tools. He's undersized, but is still a pretty good prospect. A second and a third. That is really good value just for Charlie Coyle. And then on top of that, you were able to dump Miles Wood's contract that really just was not. You didn't want that. It was a dead cap. He spent a decent chunk of the year in the AHL. He was buried. His cap was just dead cap, so you wanted to get rid of it. And they did that in beautiful fashion here. This was a really good piece of work by Chris McFarland. So yeah, an A for Colorado for grabbing a nice solid prospect to a depleted prospect pool and recouping 2 picks back. Really good piece of business there after a bunch of deadline pickups like Charlie Coyle that didn't really pan out for them and cost them a lot of assets. So a good job of recouping some of those assets. I give it a D for Columbus. I get that Brindley might have not fit into your plans because you have a lot of young forwards, a bit of a logjam, but why do Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood fit into your plans? To me, you're taking on $7.75 million in cap space. Miles Wood is under contract until 2029. I do not get what Columbus sees in this return. I don't understand why they make this move. It's another case of a rebuilding team, similar to Anaheim, similar to Seattle, overpaying to get some veterans that just aren't that desirable on their roster when they already have a logjam of young talent at the position they're acquiring for. Columbus has no issue with talent up front. They've got so many great young pieces up there. They're playing so well. Guys like Voronkov, Fantilli, Johnson, etc., etc. Guys like Keith Lindstrom in the system. And they go out and make this move. Like, this just jams you up even more. You have now too many players to play. It's a waste of cap space, in my opinion. I don't see why this move makes any sense for Columbus. Yeah, I give Columbus a D and an A to Colorado. A really, really good cap dump here by Colorado. Next up, we have the only player draft day trade. I'm not going to go through a lot of the draft, like the actual draft day trades that were made by a few different teams, like the Penguins and their trade up with Philly. I'll briefly touch on that one. That was the big one, but I think the Penguins made good value. Wasn't a great fan how they used the picks, but they got decent players. For Philly, I think they gave up a lot and reached on Jack Nesbitt at 12th overall, but I went over that a little bit, talking about it in my draft pick grades for the first round. So yeah, you want to go back and check out my more complete thoughts on some of those deals that went down. Check out that video. But we'll get to this trade that happened on day 2 of the draft. Ottawa acquiring Jordan Spence for a 2025 third and a 2026 6th round pick. So for Ottawa, grabbing Jordan Spence, a really solid, cheap, young right shot defenseman with some really good offensive upside. Love that for Ottawa. I think it's a really, really good pickup for them. And then for LA, I don't really get it. You freed up the cap space. They did not make good use of it. There wasn't much cap space to free up in general, but they did not make good use of it in free agency, trying to replace Jordan Spence, in my opinion. I think Spence is going to be a great fit in Ottawa, so I really love the deal for Ottawa. And yeah, for LA, I'm really not sure. I think that you could have got better than a 3rd round pick and a 6th. The player that was ended up getting drafted at that pick was Kurbin Limitov, who I think is a really solid piece, a really solid pickup, and a great value in the 3rd round. But it wasn't drafted by LA. The pick was later shipped off to Carolina, and they ended up drafting Kurbin Limitov. So it's just an okay, it's a meh deal for LA. LA ended up trading this 3rd round pick just the 3rd round pick for a 4th later this year and a 3rd round pick next year. So they actually got pretty good value, just pure value on the draft pick in terms of when they dealt it back over to Carolina in a trade back. So they got good value in that deal. But overall, I give it a C for just straight up the Jordan Spence trade. not a huge fan of dumping Jordan Spence, a young player like that with promise, for just a third-round pick. I get he kind of had fallen out of the good graces in LA, and he didn't really have a spot. Regardless, I'm still not a fan of dumping a player like that for that return. So yeah, C for LA and A- for Ottawa. Next was another trade made on the draft day. It was the Pittsburgh Penguins doing a proper cap dump take on, unlike all the other teams we've been seeing. They took on Connor Clifton's contract and got a 2025 second round pick, the 39th overall pick, after they had moved their own second round pick in another move. And they sent over Isaac Beliveau and Connor Timmins. Timmins was an RFA who, by the looks of it, they weren't going to re-sign. And Isaac Beliveau was, again, he was an RFA as well, was kind of a nothing AHL kind of guy. So that they were just pure contract, movements to make the contracts work. Really basically almost future considerations, you could say. For Pittsburgh, though, yeah, grabbing this contract, that's going to help your team get worse next year, help you at the cap floor, and you get a good pick back in the 2025 second. They drafted Peyton Kittles, who's a solid piece. Wouldn't have been my first choice of this pick, but regardless of that range, all the big defensemen were just flying off the board, so they got him in the action, grabbed one of them. He fit into the same range as all those other guys. There was no real standout among them besides Blake Fiddler, who was taken before this pick anyways. But yeah, so an A- for Pittsburgh. This is a proper cap dump, taking on the bad asset, getting a pick back. For Buffalo, I give it a C. You wanted to move the cap space. I get it. But a second round pick's a little steep of a price to pay, I think, for that type of contract. So yeah, overall, it's an interesting deal for Buffalo, but I like it for Pittsburgh. I think it's these are the kind of moves that Pittsburgh's going to be making a lot, and they've made even more of them as we've seen over the past few weeks, months, as the offseason's gone on, and we'll continue to see that out of them, I expect, moving forward this year. Next up, we have the John Gibson deal. John Gibson, after years and years of being in trade rumors, is finally on the move, and I think this is the first deal where Anaheim really made a solid trade. They traded away John Gibson, who expensive, and he's not your starter. You have Lucas Dostal. They got back Peter Mrazek, who can play in tandem on the 1B side, or as just as a pure backup, plus a second and a fourth round pick. So overall, solid value back for an aging, expensive goalie in John Gibson. I like the deal for Anaheim. I give it a B+, just a pretty good return in general. For Detroit, I give it a B-. It's not the price I would have liked to pay for Gibson. It's not the end of the world, though, because Gibson is a solid piece, and Detroit has serious goaltending questions. So this should help give them a little bit of short-term security over the next few years. However, you would like to see a more long-term answer moving forward for them. But overall, for the time being, it's not a bad deal for Detroit. So yeah, B- seems fair to me. Next up, Nashville and Vegas in the Nicholas Hague trade. Nashville acquiring Hague in a third-round pick in exchange for Jeremy Lauzon and Colton Sissons, whose contract was half retained by the Predators. I give this deal an A for the Predators. Again, I'm still not 100% sure what they're building there in Nashville, but the value you get on this deal is really solid. You get the best player in the deal by far, along with acquiring a solid draft pick in the 2027 third. So, they are the clear winners in this deal. Nick Hague is a bigger, he's not exactly bigger, he's not stronger, but a similar type to a Jeremy Lauzon, but more skilled, younger, with a little bit more upside there. So you upgrade in that spot, and Colton Sissons is a bottom six guy, nothing really special there. But overall, yeah, I think, dumping off those Lauzon and Sissons, it's decent. They were decent pieces, but nothing spectacular. Hague is a really solid piece to add to them. Not sure what the build is going on there, but regardless, the value is really good. For Vegas, I give it a C+. You have two players who can play a decent bottom pair, fourth line role for them. And they couldn't sign Nick Hague. They didn't have the money for it. It's not the end of the world, but it was a little bit of a steep price to pay for those guys. You didn't get much back. I think if that draft pick had been flipped, maybe it would have been a more even deal, in my opinion. But because Nashville got the third round pick, they really came away well in this trade. Next, the Detroit Red Wings dumped off Vladimir Tarasenko for future considerations. Tarasenko, I really was shocked couldn't get any picks considering the market we'd seen. As I've mentioned before, a few of the players got dealt, guys like Mason Marchment. I don't think Vladimir Tarasenko is much worse than those guys, if at all. I'm surprised they couldn't really get anything back for him, even if it's just like a fifth round pick or something, but I'm really surprised. So I give it a C- for Detroit, but you had to dump the contract. They wanted to free up the cap space. And from Minnesota, I give it a B. It's a solid piece to get in here. I mean, you lost Frederick Gaudreau. I think Vladimir Tarasenko is a more skilled player, but we'll see how he plays in Minnesota. He is getting up there in age now. He's at 33 years old, so we'll see if he keeps going. But overall, at the end of the day, worst case scenario, you're taking on this player for the next year, and if it doesn't work out, you can flip him half retained at the deadline and call it a day and get a pick back maybe. So I like the risk here for Minnesota. So yeah, I give it a B to Minnesota, C- to Detroit. Next, the Leafs getting Matias Maccelli from the Mammoth for the 2027 third. Maccelli, after acquiring Juraj Peterka, kind of slips down the lineup. Utah had real no spot for him. So they got a third round pick. I give it a B- for Utah. I like Maccelli. He hadn't been playing as well as he had his first year, so he hadn't really found his game back at the same level. So I understand it, but I think not the best return. For Toronto, I'll give it an A. I think Maccelli's a great player. You can play in your middle six on the wing. Can be a really good, valuable piece there for them. He's cheap. He's on the younger side. You're going to have to re-sign him after this season, yes, but I think you're willing to pay that price. He's 24 years old. And yeah, only a third round pick. I think it's a really solid pickup there. A good piece to have alongside there in Toronto. Next, then we have the big trade they made following that, and that's what Maccelli's coming in to do. Is he's here to replace Mitch Marner, who they traded his rights to Vegas for Nicholas Roy. To me, for Vegas, I give it a B. I think it's tough. You had to give up an asset, I guess, because if you let him go to free agency, the bidding war would have started and your price would have gotten a little out of control. They ended up only signing him they signed him for $12 million on an 8-year contract. So, you live with it. It's just an average deal for Vegas. It's solid. It's a good piece to add there. I'm just not a big fan of what they had to give up. For Toronto, I give it an A-. I think getting a player like Waugh who can play a good third line center role, can kill some penalties for you. For a UFA, you were not going to re-sign. You had no cap space to do so. Overall, pretty good piece of business there by Brad Treliving. Following up with another cap dump the Oilers made, and again, they did a really good job of dumping off their cap. I was really questioning how they were going to get rid of all their big bad contracts. They signed last year. Victor Arvidsson had no move clause. He waived it. They sent him to Boston. They got a 2027 fifth round pick back. I don't know why Boston would do this. Boston's a team that if you wanted to do a retool, do what Pittsburgh's doing. Take on this contract and get a pick back, But they gave him a pick, so I give it an A- to Edmonton, a D to Boston. It's very similar to the Evander Kane deal. It's just, what is Boston really gaining from Victor Arvidsson, a guy who was scratched in the Stanley Cup final for the Oilers for guys like Kasperi Kapanen? And you're going to take on that contract full price for a pick? Why? What are you gaining out of this interaction? For Edmonton, it's perfect. If you have some more cap space, beautiful piece of business here by Stan Bowman. Next, a little young prospect, young player type swap with Logan Mailloux headed to St. Louis and Zach Bolduc headed to Montreal. I give this an A- to Montreal and a C+ for St. Louis. I'm higher on Bolduc than I am on Mailloux. I think Bolduc had a really promising rookie year. It showed some good upside, be a good middle six guy for the Habs, and it's a really solid piece to add. They're both the same age. And then for St. Louis, or for Mailloux with Montreal, there was no real room for him. That decor is loaded, and especially after acquiring Dobson, Mailloux just wasn't going to crack a spot. And with his defensive lapses and his inability to grow defensively, I'm a little lower on his potential because he wasn't great at the NHL level defending in general, and he got to the AHL and playing for Laval in the Calder Cup playoffs. You could still see some of those same mistakes coming up, and he still had those mental defensive lapses that really hurt his game. So for St. Louis, I don't really see there's upside in Mailloux for sure, but I just don't see why you trade a guy like Zach Bolduc for Logan Mailloux. So yeah, C+ for St. Louis and A- for Montreal. I think they come out on top here with a solid return for a guy who just wasn't going to have a role on your team with the way your prospects were panning out. Moving us along, the Penguins traded Alex Nedeljkovic to the San Jose Sharks for a 2028 third-round pick. Nedeljkovic is a solid 1B. I think he's going to be a good, solid veteran guy. He's going to be better than Alexander Georgiev was, in my opinion. And he'll play in a 1A, 1B role with Yaroslav Askarov for the Sharks. So a solid player to have for San Jose, but they paid a bit more of a price than I would have liked if I'm them in the 2028 third. They have picks. They have so many picks and prospects. It doesn't really hurt them. So I give it a C+ there. Again, solid veteran guy to have behind Askarov this year. Should give you some stability if that's really what you want. Who knows what the Sharks' plans are for next season? Odds are they'll still be one of the bottom 5 teams in the league. And for Pittsburgh, you've got a logjam in net. You got to want to play some of your young guys like Joel Blomqvist and some guys they acquired later, which I'll get into. So moving on to Davidovich it made complete sense. Getting a third-round pick back is a solid piece of business there. I give it a B for them, a C+ for San Jose. It's a decent deal. On to another big deal that happened on free agent frenzy day, which was the Keandre Miller trade to Carolina. They sent over Scott Morrow, a first and a second-round pick for Miller, then sent him to an 8-year, $7.5 million contract. I gave my thoughts on that contract in my contract rating video that came out a couple weeks ago, so if you want to see my thoughts on that, go check it out. But overall, it's an expensive price to pay. I think the player is a great pickup for Carolina, so I give it a B+. I'm just not a fan of. I'm a fan of the player. I'm a fan of the fit. I like what he can do in Carolina. Just not a fan of the price it costed to get him there. Because if you had just offer sheeted him, it would have been a first, a second, and a third. And I value Scott Morrow a little higher than a third-round pick. I value him as kind of like a second-rounder, but a high-end second-rounder. He's a second-rounder that's proven. A second-rounder that has shown he can play at the NHL level in a reduced role, that is, but he's still pretty young, at only 22 years old. And then a first and a second-round pick. I like this return a lot for the Rangers. I give it an A for them. It'll be interesting to see if they trade these picks. They want to, how they want to work with that sort of those picks. If they want to just pick them, or they want to, keep upgrading their team. But overall, the value they got for Keandre Miller, who was not going to re-sign, is really solid. And Scott Morrow, the decor there is pretty depleted, so Scott Morrow can play a solid role in New York. And Keandre Miller is a perfect fit to play next to a guy like Jacob Slavin or behind a guy like Jacob Slavin over in Carolina. So it's a solid win-win deal, but I think the value, the fits make sense for both sides. The value leans towards the Rangers. So an A for the Rangers, B+ for Carolina. And then one of the big deals that happened that was, it's a really big deal, and I'm disappointed my team couldn't get their hands on Isaac Howard as he went to Edmonton for Sam O'Reilly. I give it an A for Edmonton. I mean, this is a perfect move. This is the exact kind of moves you gotta make to keep this team competitive. You got a cost-controlled winger who's really got a ton of potential. He's a Hobey Baker winner, tons of offensive juice. Has really developed well. A little bit of a slow start to his development, but has picked up his pace and has been a really, really good piece. And I think next to a guy like a McDavid or a Draisaitl, a shooter like him can be really, really dynamic. And again, got him about 3 years on a rookie deal. It's perfect. It's the perfect kind of player that Edmonton needs to keep their costs down while still keeping the skill up. Isaac Howard's going to bring more to that top six than a guy like Evander Kane was skill-wise, and is going to cost $5 million less. So a perfect piece of business for Edmonton. And Sam O'Reilly's a solid prospect. He was their best prospect until this trade, or second best behind Savoy. He was that guy for them. But at the end of the day, he was going to take a while to get there. He still had a few years of development left, so he wasn't going to make an impact right away. Edmonton wants to win now. This is the perfect balance of you want to win now with a guy like Isaac Howard, and he can be a long-term piece as well. So it's a perfect mix there. Him and Matt Savoy are going to be very crucial to the Oilers' success. If they can play well next to guys like McDavid and Draisaitl, they will be massive. Having those kinds of skilled players on those kinds of contracts is how a lot of teams find success while paying expensive money for top-end players. So love that deal for Edmonton. And for Tampa, you really, again, had almost no leverage. You were going to lose him for a second-round pick if you didn't find a trade partner because he was not signing with you, and you ended up getting back a decent prospect, a solid guy. He's just an average prospect, going to be a good third-line, fourth-line defensive two-way center in the future. So I like it for Tampa as well, considering the leverage they had in the situation. So a B- for Tampa, an A for Edmonton. Really good deal there for them and their future. And then lastly, I'll mention one more trade, the Matt Dumba trade to Pittsburgh. They did another move similar similar to what they did with Buffalo, with Connor Clifton, took on Matt Dumba's contract on a second-round pick back, gave up Vladislav Kolyachonok. Solid defenseman for Dallas. I think he can be a decent third-pair guy. But overall, I like that they got a second-round pick back. So just wanted to throw the thoughts out real quickly on that one. And then we get into the other trade they made. This one was kind of a shock to me, and a shock to a lot of people, but it makes sense the more you think about it. It just wasn't one that was rumored, as the Penguins have kept a lot of things on their wraps. But it's Artur Shilovs to Pittsburgh for Chase Tillman and a fourth-round pick. For the Penguins, it's interesting because it causes a real logjam in net. I figured with the Dustovich on its way out, it meant Blomqvist would play the full-time backup, full-time starter role, maybe 1A, 1B with Jari, and that would be that. But with Shilovs, it seems now they're going to keep Blomqvist down again for another year, unless a trade is looming for Tristan Jari. And we won't know, because despite what all the reports are, the Penguins have kept everything very well wrapped up. All these trades with them seemingly come out of nowhere, and they're uploaded by the team before any insiders get their hands on them. So they are really doing a good job of keeping things in-house. So we aren't going to know if a trade like a Jari trade or something is going to occur. But regardless, Shilovs is a solid piece. He's shown some really good flashes. He was the Calder Cup MVP in Vancouver, in Abbotsford, as they won the Calder Cup, and he's got some real good clutch genes in him. The issue is you have to play him at the NHL level, because if he will hit waivers and he will get claimed. That is a surefire thing. But yeah, this is a guy who is a World Championship MVP, won a bronze medal for Latvia, their first medal at the event. He was great for the Canucks in the playoffs during that run when Demko went down last year, and was great for Abbotsford in the playoffs this past season. So he's shown he does really well in high-intensity, high-pressure situations, but he hasn't been able to string together a lot of success in the regular season, just together at the NHL level. And then, so, we'll see where it works. I think it'll be a decent piece for Pittsburgh, but it's not the best place for him to show it off because our D-core is going to be so bad. But he'll get the playing time, at least the NHL level in Pittsburgh, that he wasn't going to get in Vancouver. And that's the other side of the coin for Vancouver. You sign Demko to an extension, you sign Lankinen to an extension, you're paying him a lot of money. Why are you doing that when you had Artur Shilovs? I don't know, but you're doing it regardless. So you're going to have to put Shilovs on waivers. Instead, you get back a 4th-round pick and a decent AHLer in Chase Stillman. So for that, I give it a C+ for Vancouver. I think it would have made more sense to not pay one of Lankinen and Demko and keep Artur Shilovs around and, trade one of those guys, get a really good return, but they opted to trade Shilovs. So a C+ for them, but again, at the end of the day, you had to make the deal because he was going to go on waivers when he wasn't going to make the NHL roster. And for Pittsburgh, I give it a B+. I like the value in the trade. I think a 4th-round pick considering their draft capital is almost nothing. The issue for them is they now have too many goalies that need to play. Because I think for me, Blomqvist should be playing at the NHL level because he doesn't have much to gain from the AHL level, and it also hurts a guy like Sergei Murashov's development playing behind Blomqvist. So it's a bit of a log jam, and they even have decent pieces like Philip Larson, who's shown some really good stuff as well. So we'll see where they go, how they navigate that, but I think it's a bit of a log jam. Regardless, I like the value of the deal there. A couple other notable trades made. The Leafs dumped Ryan Reeves' contract on San Jose for Henry Thrun. I think it's a really good value in a contract dump. Thrun's a solid bottom pair guy, and he probably won't get those types of minutes in Toronto, but still a good value piece there. And then the Leafs also acquired Dakota Joshua for a 4th-round pick the other day. Another good piece to add to their bottom 6, a good value there for the Leafs. So that'll do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you disagree with any of my grades on these trades, and if you have any other opinions on these trades, any trades you think are going to happen, any rumors that you think are swirling, guys like Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust and Erik Karlsson still have been yet to be dealed. Those seem to be the big assets on the market. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below on all the things that happened over the offseason, all your thoughts on the trades, on the free agency signings. Let me know down below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.